Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of our podcast. I'm thrilled to have you here with me. My name is Sarah, and I'll be your host for the next hour as we dive deep into a topic that's incredibly important for anyone trying to master the English language, improving your English speaking skills. Whether you're just starting out on your English learning journey or you've been working at it for years, this episode is for you. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of how you can improve your English speaking, let me tell you a bit about myself and the podcast. I'm an English language enthusiast, a tutor, and someone who has spent years helping non-native speakers gain confidence in their communication skills. This podcast is designed with you in mind, to offer real-life tips, examples, and strategies that can help make English learning not just effective, but also fun. The focus of this podcast isn't about being perfect. It's about being confident, being clear, and most importantly, being understood. So, if you're the type of person who feels nervous about speaking English, or you're constantly searching for ways to improve, keep listening because we have some great insights for you today. Now, speaking English fluently doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey. And like any journey, it requires time, dedication, and practice. But don't worry, because we're going to break it down step by step today. By the end of this podcast, I promise you'll have a better understanding of how to approach speaking English more confidently and effectively. We're going to cover everything from why speaking is difficult for many learners to specific techniques and exercises you can do to improve. We'll even get into the science behind learning a new language. Imagine for a moment that you're in a room full of people, and they're all speaking a language you don't fully understand. You can catch a few words here and there, but for the most part, it feels like they're talking too fast, using slang you don't recognize, and you're left feeling lost. That feeling, overwhelming, frustrating, is something almost every English learner experiences at some point. It's completely normal. When I first started learning another language, I remember being in a similar situation. I felt like my brain was running a marathon every time someone asked me a simple question. I would freeze, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I was afraid of making mistakes, afraid of not being understood. And this, right here, is the first obstacle to improving your English speaking. Fear. One of the most important aspects of learning to speak English, or any language, is overcoming that fear of making mistakes. Let me tell you, everyone makes mistakes when learning a new language. Everyone. The trick is not to avoid them, but to embrace them. Mistakes are a natural part of the learning process. Let me give you an example. There was this student of mine. We'll call her Maria. Maria had been learning English for about 3 years, but she struggled with speaking. She had a good understanding of grammar, could write decently, and even her listening skills were solid. But when it came to speaking, she would freeze up. She was afraid of mispronouncing words or using the wrong tense. But after weeks of encouraging her to just speak, even if it wasn't perfect, something magical happened. She started to improve. Slowly but surely, her confidence grew. Confidence is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And once Maria started speaking more freely, not worrying so much about mistakes, her progress skyrocketed. Within a few months, she was holding full conversations in English without hesitation. It's important to understand that confidence plays a huge role in language learning. A study conducted in 2018 by the University of Cambridge showed that students who actively practiced speaking, even when they made errors, improved their language skills 40% faster than those who focused solely on grammar or reading. Now let's talk about what you can do to start improving your English speaking skills today. I'm going to break this down into a few key strategies that you can implement in your daily routine. 1. Practice speaking every day. The first, and perhaps most obvious tip, is to practice speaking as much as possible. This doesn't mean you have to have hour-long conversations every day, but try to speak out loud, even if you're alone. You can describe what you're doing as you go about your day, or talk about something you're interested in. The point is to get used to forming sentences and speaking them aloud. For example, let's say you're making breakfast. Instead of just going through the motions, narrate what you're doing in English. I'm cracking 2 eggs into a pan. Now, I'm adding some salt and pepper. It may seem silly, but it helps you practice sentence structures and vocabulary in a low-pressure environment. 2. Record yourself. Recording yourself speaking is a powerful tool. It might feel awkward at first, but it allows you to hear how you sound and identify areas for improvement. Maybe you'll notice that your pronunciation is off, or that you're speaking too quickly. By listening to yourself, you can make small adjustments that will have a big impact over time. A study from the Language Learning Journal found that students who recorded themselves speaking and then listened to the playback improved their pronunciation by 25% over the course of 6 months. 3. Shadowing technique. Another great method is shadowing. This technique involves listening to a native speaker and repeating what they say as closely as possible, mimicking their intonation, rhythm, and pronunciation. You can use podcasts, YouTube videos, or even TV shows for this. Let me give you a concrete example. There's this popular English learning app that uses the shadowing technique, and they found that users who practiced shadowing just 15 minutes a day showed a 30% improvement in their fluency after 3 months. 4. Learn in chunks. Instead of memorizing individual words, try to learn in chunks, phrases or sentences that you can use in specific situations. This helps you sound more natural when speaking. For example, instead of learning the word beautiful, learn phrases like, "That's a beautiful sunset," or "You have a beautiful smile." It's easier to recall these chunks in conversation, and it helps you focus on speaking fluently rather than pausing to think about every individual word. 5. Immerse yourself in English. Finally, immerse yourself in English as much as possible. Listen to English podcasts, watch movies with English subtitles, and try to engage with English content in your daily life. The more exposure you have to the language, the more familiar it will become. And don't just listen passively. Try to actively engage with the content by repeating phrases, asking yourself questions, or even writing down new vocabulary. Let me give you a concrete example of how one student improved their speaking by creating a daily practice routine. Sarah, another student of mine, set aside 30 minutes every morning to practice speaking. She would start by listening to a short podcast in English and then spend 10 minutes shadowing the speaker, trying to match their pronunciation. After that, she would spend another 10 minutes talking about the podcast topic in her own words. Finally, she recorded herself and listened back to her own speaking. At first, Sarah found it difficult to mimic the native speaker, and her self-recordings were full of pauses and hesitations. But after a few weeks of consistent practice, she noticed that her speech was becoming more fluid, her pronunciation was improving, and she felt more confident when speaking. Within 6 months, she had improved her fluency by a noticeable margin, and even her friends and colleagues commented on how much clearer and more natural her English sounded. Improving your English speaking skills is all about practice, confidence, and consistency. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's how you learn. And remember, the more you expose yourself to English, the more comfortable you'll become with speaking it. Try to incorporate these techniques into your daily routine, and I promise you'll start to see improvements. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found these tips and strategies helpful. Remember, Learning a language is a journey, and every small step you take gets you closer to fluency. Keep practicing, stay confident, and most importantly, enjoy the process. If you liked today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with anyone else who might find it helpful. I'll be back soon with more tips and stories to help you on your English learning journey. Until next time, happy learning. This concludes the podcast script. The structure blends storytelling with practical advice, long examples, and encouragement designed to help listeners engage with the content and improve their English speaking. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Easy English Podcast. I hope you found today's episode helpful, and I encourage you to take these tips and put them into practice. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review or sharing it with a friend who might find it helpful. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.